Hello, I'm Michael LaBossiere. I'm speaking on my own behalf. I'm not being paid to do the speaking, which would be pretty obvious because if I was getting paid to speak about political things, I'd probably have a much nicer cert. Now here's a question for you. When is religious freedom not religious freedom? And the obvious answer is when it's not, of course. As part of the systematic attack on public education in Florida, Proposition 8 has been put on the ballot. While it is called the Religious Freedom Amendment, the reality is rather different. After all, religious freedom means the freedom to practice one's faith without the interference by the state. And this is already guaranteed by the United States Constitution and also the Florida State Constitution. What this amendment would explicitly do is remove the prohibition against funding sectarian institutions with public money. The exact wording of the proposition is as follows: proposing an amendment to the state constitution, providing that no individual or entity be denied, on the basis of religious identity or belief, government benefits, funding, or other support, except as required by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and deleting the prohibition against using revenues from the public treasury, directly or indirectly, in aid of any church, sect, or religious denomination, or in aid of any sectarian institution. So if the proposition passes, the Florida State Constitution, Section 3, Article 1, will now read as follows: there shall be no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting or penalizing the free exercise thereof. Religious freedom shall not justify practices inconsistent with public morals, peace, or safety. No individual may be discriminated against or barred from receiving funding on the basis of religious identity or belief. While this proposition is being sold as being a matter of religious freedom, the reality of the matter is clearly revealed by Florida Representative Stephen Precourt. He regards education, apparently, as a marketplace and contends, to quote him, they shouldn't be telling a group that just because you're a faith-based organization, you shouldn't be participating in the market. I am, of course, for religious freedom. However, religious freedom is already adequately protected by existing laws, and this proposition does nothing to expand religious freedom. Rather, as Precourt indicates, its main purpose seems to be to allow public money to fund private sectarian schools. Naturally, it would also allow public money to be given to any sectarian institution. On the face of it, this would seem to allow public funds to be used to construct a new church, synagogue, or mosque, or perhaps even fund ministers, rabbis, etc. Now, I'm opposed to this proposition on the following grounds. First, the people of Florida, of which I am one, have been repeatedly told that the state budget must be cut because of a lack of funds. For example, the public education system has been experiencing widespread and deep cuts. It would certainly be inconsistent to be cutting the budget in so many areas, while at the same time proposing what amounts to public funding for sectarian groups. Naturally, the proposition does not specify that money will be provided, but it would allow sectarian groups access to public money that is apparently in such terribly short supply. Given the existing budget cuts, this hardly seems to be something that we can actually afford. Second, as Precourt has indicated, the actual purpose of this proposition seems to be to allow public money to fund private sectarian schools. It seems reasonable to infer that there are already plans to direct education funds from public schools to these private sectarian schools. If this occurs, this would do additional damage to an already weakened public school system. This would, of course, be detrimental to society. After all, as Thomas Jefferson and others of the founders argued, a public education system is a foundation for democracy. Third, there is the obvious concern that certain sectarian groups will be able to avail themselves of the opportunity afforded by this proposition, while others will not, or at the very least to a far lesser degree. For example, consider the chances that a Christian school will be funded, and then consider the chances that an Islamic school, or an atheist school, because technically atheism is a religion. As such, there are legitimate concerns that the proposition would result in the state supporting specific sectarian groups at the expense of others, which would certainly be a problem in light of religious freedom. Now, proponents of this proposition contend that it is necessary because sectarian organizations are currently being discriminated against on the basis of their being sectarian rather than secular. Now, being concerned about discrimination is of course important, and if it could be shown that these sectarian groups are being unjustly and unfairly discriminated against, they would have legitimate grounds for concern. However, I have two responses to this concern. First, sectarian organizations do currently receive state funding to support their secular public programs. As such, when sectarian groups are engaged in secular society, in the secular sector, try saying that 10 times fast, they are entitled as any other group to public funding. It hardly seems unjust or discrimination to not fund specific sectarian operations that are not in the secular and public realm. In other words, paying for stuff that serves the public good, fine. Paying for stuff that serves the particular sectarian goal, perhaps not so fine. Secondly, sectarian groups do, actually, get treated with discrimination. However, it's a discrimination in their favor. To be specific, sectarian organizations benefit from being tax exempt, at least in certain areas. That is, it could be argued, counter any alleged discrimination when it comes to public funds. After all, if sectarian organizations are content to not pay taxes in regards to the sectarian aspects of their operations, they should hardly expect the state to help fund those sectarian operations. As such, I intend to vote against Proposition 8, and I would recommend that you do too, assuming of course you live in Florida and you are a registered voter and are able to vote in light of all the voter concerns here in my state. Anyways, thank you for listening. Goodbye.